Hi everyone, welcome to the first episode of Unravelling Fast Fashion with Vanessa Ko. I'm going to start off this podcast by telling you about who I am and what this podcast is going to be all about. So as I said a couple of seconds ago, my name is Vanessa. I am in my fourth year of fashion business management at the University of Alberta, which I will refer to as the U of A throughout this podcast. I find a lot of new people I talk to have never heard about my degree, so I always like to give a little overview of what it is. The degree I'm in is a super dynamic program offered by the Agricultural, Life, and Environmental Sciences faculty. My program is a combination of classes offered by the Human Ecology Department and the Alberta School of Business, so I really do get the best of both worlds with my education. In addition to my degree, I'm taking a certificate in sustainability through the U of A. In this certificate, you focus on human or environmental issues that are important in our world today. This certificate requires an integrative project, so I have decided to do a podcast about sustainability because I've always honestly wanted to start a podcast, and I find I've written a lot of essays on sustainability, but I never physically talk about it, so I thought talking about sustainability on a podcast would be a nice change in pace. But before we go deeper into the podcast, what exactly is sustainability? Well, there are thousands of similar but different definitions of sustainability online. The U of A has the definition I like best. They've taken the sustainability definition from the 1987 Brundtland Report, and they define it as meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. But of course, within sustainability, I had to choose a specific topic for this project. I have chosen the topic of sustainability in fashion because that's an area I've always had an interest in. In my human ecology classes, along with some of the business classes, we've talked about how the textile and apparel industry is considered unsustainable, specifically fast fashion. Now, fast fashion is a concept that has gained a lot of popularity in the last couple of years, but for those of you who don't know what it means, fast fashion is a concept that describes the production and consumption of trendy, cheap, and quickly processed clothing. So, for example, fast fashion retailers include Zara, Uniqlo, H&M, Forever 21, and etc. When I was younger, I had no idea what fast fashion was, and I never knew how the clothes were so cheap and how there were always so many styles available. But I didn't care. I was 12 years old and wanted the coolest new shirt or pants. And I think even now, knowing the negative repercussions of fast fashion, I still find myself shopping fast fashion at times. I think because it's so accessible, it's hard to stop because obviously people, including myself, want to look good and they don't want to go broke trying to look good. So these companies all have cheap, trendy clothing that gets manufactured super fast, but how are they able to do this? For those of you who don't know, it's at the cost of our environment and society. So I'm going to have different episodes doing deep dives into how fast fashion affects the three pillars of sustainability. The three pillars being our environment, society, and economy. So in our next episode, I'm going to talk about fast fashion's effect on the environment. So producing these fast fashion garments create CO2 emissions. It uses an excessive amount of water to create. It creates water pollution and more. On episode 3, I'm going to talk about how fast fashion affects our society. The garments are cheaply made because they underpay their workers and make their workers construct these garments in terrible working conditions. On episode 4, I'm going to talk about how fast fashion affects the economy. Fast fashion is detrimental to our people and our planet, but the demand for fast fashion is consistently high, and the fashion industry concerns the livelihood of about 15% of the world's workforce. This leads the concept of fast fashion to be extremely complicated, as it provides many jobs globally. Those are the overviews for all of the episodes. I hope you have enjoyed this first episode, and I hope you keep tuning in for the rest. This is the end of Unravelling Fast Fashion, Episode 1. See you in the next episode. Welcome back to Unravelling Fast Fashion. In this episode, I'm going to be doing a deep dive on how fast fashion affects the environment. So how is fashion bad for the planet? Firstly, these fast fashion garments require an abundant amount of water to be produced. Garments are made of fabrics, which are made of fibers, and some fibers require a lot of water to be made. For example, cotton. Cotton is a very popular fiber, and I'm willing to bet something you're wearing right now is partially made out of cotton. According to the documentary Alex James, Slowing Down Fast Fashion, it takes more than 10,000 liters of water to construct enough cotton fibers for a pair of jeans. I can barely comprehend that amount of water, and I know as a teenager I had well over 25 pairs of jeans, so that is a lot of water used. Cotton is not the only fiber that needs water to be produced, and water is also needed in other steps of garment production. In an article by Nini Mackie titled The Environmental Price of Fast Fashion, they say that the fashion industry as a whole uses approximately 79 trillion liters per year to produce their garments. So cotton isn't the only culprit of excessive water use. Moving on to the next topic, water pollution. Yes, creating fashion garments not only uses excessive amounts of water, but also contributes to water pollution. So how is that possible? Well, clothing companies, have to dye their garments to be a specific color or perform a specific treatment on a garment to get it a certain way. Unfortunately, these treatments and dyes are typically toxic, and these toxins aren't treated properly for disposal. So, according to Nini Mackie, the toxins can enter local groundwater and have awful effects on local ecosystems. And think about it, every item usually needs to be either dyed or treated or both. The frequency of these activities lead about 20% of the world's industrial water pollution to be because of textile treatment and dyeing. That statistic and the following statistic are from Nini Mackie's article of The Environmental Price of Fast Fashion. So I don't know if everyone here is feeling guilty yet, but I know I am. Rest assured that is not the objective of this podcast whatsoever. This is all supposed to be received in an informative manner. So unfortunately, the list just keeps getting longer. The fashion industry also pollutes the air. Yes, water and air, and I don't know if anyone's surprised by this because a lot of things pollute the air, but still, this is another one of those things. Nini Mackie states that the fashion industry is responsible for producing 8 to 10% of global CO2 emissions, and the industry causes about 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. When I first read this, I had no idea how these emissions were linked to fashion, but unfortunately, the manufacturing, shipping, and the consumption of the garments all contribute to the CO2 emissions. Lastly, we have the textile waste that the textile and apparel industry produces. While this is not the last environmental concern of fast fashion, it is the last one I'm going to talk about today. So according to Nini Mackie, 150 billion garments were produced globally in 2012, and 60% of these items were discarded. That is insane to think about because that was 11 years ago, and personally, I think we're producing more garments now than in 2012. This post-consumer textile waste creates an overbearing amount of garbage. It's crazy because I've gone through a lot of clothes, but I don't think I've fully thrown any clothing items out. But I have donated and consigned a lot of clothes, and at the end of the day, you don't know where all your items are going to go. To conclude this topic, fast fashion has significant effects on the environment through excessive water usage, water pollution, microplastic pollution, air pollution, and textile waste. This fact highlights the need for sustainable and responsible practices within the industry. This is the end of Unravelling Fast Fashion, Episode 2. See you in the next episode. Welcome to episode number 3 of Unravelling Fast Fashion. So on this episode, we're going to be talking about how fast fashion impacts society and our people. A lot of people think fast fashion is so great because of the low prices, which is a fair opinion, but I don't think a lot of people think about how these prices can be so low. The clothes are cheap because these fast fashion companies sell so much of their garments, but pay their garment workers so little. According to Claudio in the article Waste Couture, Environmental Impact of the Clothing Industry, some garment workers in China make as little as 12 to 18 cents per hour. According to the documentary Alex James, Slowing Down Fast Fashion, $5 an hour is a lot for a garment worker. I think a lot of us struggle to get by getting paid minimum wage of $15 in Alberta, let alone $5 an hour. Sadly, many of these workers have minimal options for employment, so they are forced to work for little pay. And different countries are affected differently by this. According to the same documentary in the 90s, America manufactured about half of their garments directly in America. But as of 2016, only 2% of American clothing was actually made in America. Most of these garments are produced in low and middle class countries because they have lower wages, so it's cheaper for companies to do business like this. According to Bick et al. In the article, The Global Environmental Injustice of Fast Fashion, 90% of the world's clothing is produced in low and middle class countries by their labor workers. Not only is their pay low, but they actually work in terrible conditions. So in 2013, the Rana Plaza, a factory in Bangladesh, completely collapsed due to poor building infrastructure, and the tragic incident killed over 1,000 people and left many more injured. The building was in hazardous conditions, and while not all factories simply collapse on the spot, many factories in low and middle class countries are still dangerous to work in. According to Bick et al. In the same article, they have inadequate working conditions and safety standards are not enforced due to poor political infrastructure. Even if you forget about the building infrastructure, the environment is still dangerous to work in because the fibers that they work with can also have negative effects on human health. Producing garments with cotton and synthetic fibers can be negative to the workers because they're inhaling the fiber pollution all day. Working with these fibers can cause respiratory issues due to poor ventilation, which is a major concern because of the cotton dust and synthetic air particulates floating around, according to Bick et al. The fashion industry negatively affects our people because labor workers that create fast fashion garments get underpaid and are at risk for health and safety concerns when they work in poorly made buildings with fiber pollution. These facts highlight the need for fair working conditions and practices within these countries. This is the end of Unravelling Fast Fashion, Episode 3. See you in the next episode. Welcome back to Unravelling Fast Fashion. Thank you for tuning in for episode number 4, our last episode. In this episode, we're going to talk about how fast fashion affects our economy. In my opinion, this is where it starts to get really complicated because it's one of those things where, okay, if fast fashion really is that terrible and people know about this and more people are learning about this, we should stop buying and supporting it to make fast fashion end. First off, I don't personally think you could get everyone to stop buying fast fashion. Secondly, we have to think about the economy. Think about the jobs that would be lost. Fast fashion is only growing in popularity. According to Goal and Michaelides in the article, What is the Economic Impact of Fast Fashion? In the 1980s, the average American purchased 12 pieces of clothing a year. And now that number is up to 68 pieces of clothing a year. They even said that 88% of all consumers in the U.S. prefer fast fashion because it caters to the demands of consumer style and desired price. So clearly, fast fashion isn't going anywhere soon as it's the main choice for consumers. Because of its popularity, it is a very large contributor to the growth of the fashion market. In that same article by Goal and Michaelides, they say that the global apparel and footwear sales were estimated to be $1.7 trillion in 2019. And they predicted that the industry will grow to $2.9 trillion by 2030. It sounds like the industry is not shrinking anytime soon. In addition to the sales and revenue that the industry brings in, the fashion industry concerns the livelihood of about 15% of the entire world's workforce. If the world's population is 8 billion currently, 15% of that number is 1.2 billion. 1.2 billion people are a part of the fashion industry. Think about all those companies, those jobs, and those people. This shows that the fashion industry has a large economic impact on the world. Like I said in past podcasts, the textile and apparel industry affects some countries more than others because some countries produce more textile and apparel more than others. In Bangladesh, the textile and apparel makes up for 8% of the country's GDP and 84% of all exports. These statistics show that Bangladesh's economy is quite reliant on the textile and apparel industry. So even if everyone somehow decided to stop buying fast fashion tomorrow, our economy would be negatively affected by the termination of jobs and revenue. This is why fast fashion is so complicated. It requires a dynamic and multifaceted solution due to the industry's vast scale and the economic dependency of many nations on its revenue. So in conclusion, fast fashion's trendiness, low cost, and convenience truly comes at a cost to the planet, people, and economy. In the last couple of episodes, we've done a deep dive on how fast fashion affects the 3 pillars of sustainability. From environmental degradation to exploitation of garment workers the harmful effects are undeniable. Addressing this issue requires a multifaceted approach. Despite the complexity of the problem, collective efforts are crucial in finding a solution and creating a more sustainable fashion industry. I hope everyone learned something in this podcast. I think the biggest takeaway from this podcast might be that fast fashion is complicated. There is no single solution. This is Vanessa Ko, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to Unravelling Fast Fashion.